In World War II, the sidearm of the French Army was the Model 1935A or 35S, also known as the M.A.S. Uh, and these are neat little guns. I mean, it's a Browning style pistol. But if you want to shoot them, you've got your work cut out for you because the round that they are chambered for, the 32 French long, or the 7.65 M.A.S. as it's also known, is as obsolete gets. No brass, no loading data, difficult to find a bullet. It can be a real challenge. But these are fun guns to shoot, and I think it's worth the experimentation. The 32 French long is usually compared to the 32 ACP, and I think that leads to some bad choices farther into the reloading process. It's got some significant differences. It's a tenth of an inch longer than the 32 ACP, and the French long takes a smaller diameter bullet. Right now, there are very few sources of brass. Brass is made basically by taking a 32 Smith & Wesson long, which is a revolver cartridge, machining off the rim, and then machining on an extractor groove. So these babies cost about 30 bucks for a bag of 20, which is quite a bit. You can get them from Buffalo Arms and from Midway. The 32 ACP takes a .312 inch diameter bullet, but the 32 French long takes a .309 inch diameter bullet, which is quite a difference, and not a very common bullet on the market. I loaded mine using Hornady XTPs. Now you can also load them with lead using 312 bullets, which I have done in the past. The results aren't great, but it functions. The lead is soft enough to go down the bore. All right, there aren't any dies made for the 32 French long, but you can load them using 32 auto die sets. Now, this isn't perfect, but believe me, nothing you're going to do with the 32 French long is going to be perfect. My main gripe with using 32 ACP die sets is that I can't get the kind of neck tension that I would like to have. But it puts a pretty good crimp on them. Everything seems to work just fine, and you can get excellent accuracy. So this is pretty much the way to go. When it comes to powder choices for the 32 French long, I take a different path than most people do. There are no loads for this gun in the manuals, but if you hit the blogs and the usual, bullet boards, you can get some load data on it. And most people are loading it with either bullseye or unique, with unique seeming to be the preferred powder. Anywhere from 3.4 to 3.7 grains with just about every bullet ever mentioned. I've never had good luck with any of those loads using unique or bullseye. And I think that the problem is that most people are thinking 32 ACP and then they just kind of work it up a little bit. The case is larger, and I think it would benefit from using a higher quantity of a slower burning powder. And that's what I've done. So I'm using Power Pistol and Blue Dot, and I'm going to experiment with some loads here. Well, before we go to the loading bench, I'll give you a look at the specs on the 32 French long and give you a couple of caveats. Caveat number one, I pretty much cannot find 85 grain bullets in 309 diameter, so I'm using 90 grains. Also, they list the cartridge's overall length as 1.198 inches. I'm here to tell you, when I load them that long, you can chamber them, but the bullet is actually getting into the rifling. And if you try to jack that round out of the chamber, it pulls the bullet right out of the case. Because, of course, only a tiny bit of the bullet is even in the case at that length. I just don't know how the French did it. I load them to 1.11 inches overall length, and they function just fine. So now we'll talk about loads a little bit. I loaded up 3 batches of test ammo. I loaded 1 batch with unique using 3.6 grains. I loaded 1 batch with Power Pistol using 4.3 grains. and the third batch I loaded with blue dot, 4.8 grains. Now, I've never had good luck with unique, but it's kind of the de facto standard. So that 3.6 grain load is below maximum for it, and it's a very well accepted load. So I figured that would be my baseline, and then I would see if I could improve that with the power pistol and the blue dot. And the answer in the back of the book is I did. Well, I'm getting ready to load my first test batch. And you can hear Axel is protesting over here. Getting ready to load my first test batch of 32 French long. And this is going to be loaded with 3.6 grains of unique powder. And for those of you who are familiar with my other reloading videos, you probably recognize this as the Harry Potter bench, because it lives under the staircase, just like Harry. But this is the bench that I do my single stage work on, and that's what I'm doing over here. So here's the setup. We're using the RCBS die set that I showed you, and we're using an M1 carbine shell holder, which is not perfect, but none of them are really. But it does the trick. I've already loaded a couple of rounds, but we're loading this with 3.6 grains of unique. I've got a digital scale and a trickler here, and that's pretty important. So I'm going to load up the trickler with a little more powder. Doesn't take much. And position it over there. And we've got the measure thrown pretty close. So I'm going to load 15. And the reason I load 15 is I'm going to chronograph 5, shoot 10 for accuracy, and see how we're doing. We'll do that with the 3 loads. And then we'll pick the one that we like the best and then fine-tune that. So let's throw some powder. Now I always dump one and put it right back in the reservoir because I want to make sure that I don't have an old measured load in there. I'm going to pour it into the pan, and we're at 3.5. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run the trickler. I don't know how well you'll see this. There we go, 3.6. I only had to drop a couple of grains in. I take a shell, I'm going to put a powder funnel over it, dump that powder charge in. I'm going to take a Hornady 309 XTP. I'm going to put that right on here. And we're going to go. We'll load it up. And there we go. A finished round 32 French long. Now I'm just going to get 15 of these ready, and then switch over powders and do the same procedure 3 times, and then we'll go out and shoot them. Well, that's it for part 1. In part 2, we'll take these loads to the range and we'll see which one performs the best.